Now, the book of Job in the Bible is a book that I didn't pay much attention to it. I've read parts of it here and there. I've heard it being quoted. Of course, you have preachers quote it many times. But reading the Guide for the Perplexed makes me realize that it's a book that some people, and in particular philosophers, take to be a very interesting book and a very unique book. Maimonides does talk about it extensively, I must say. And then Baruch Spinoza, in his book Theological, whatever is the next book I'm going to go through, talks about it as well, and he does provide details that Maimonides doesn't touch on, even though Maimonides does talk about the book extensively. In fact, an entire chapter. He has an entire chapter that talks about the book. I'm trying to get you the correct title for Spinoza's book. Hopefully, I'll get it. Anyways, it's not important. But Spinoza is also another philosopher that is often quoted a lot. So let's look at what Maimonides says about the book of Job. But before I go into that, let me just give you the general idea in the book of Job. So the book of Job talks about Job, of course, and it talks about him having a good life, having a family, his wealth, he's of good health. And then there's the book, the way it's written is like God and Satan are having a conversation. In fact, it's one of those few places in the Bible where we are told, or a scenario is described where God and Satan are kind of having a conversation, and God seemingly gives Satan the right to go and test Job, but God tells the Satan, do everything to him, but don't touch his soul. And then Satan goes and does things to Job. That includes, he starts with taking away his wealth, and then killing his kids, and then making him sick. And Maimonides tells us even the way those happen is not in an haphazard way. It's like that arrangement is well thought about, or was well thought about by whoever wrote the book of Job, such that it's starting from outside coming in, like many people who wouldn't really curse the God if they lost part of their wealth, but they might change their mind when now they lose their kids, and some might not, but most people will now really care when it's about their own existence that is threatened. Now, Maimonides seems like he is of the opinion that the book of Job is not based on a true story. I'm going to read what he says. He thinks it's a fictional book. Baruch Spinoza thinks the book was not written by an Hebrew or a Jewish person. He thinks the book was written by a Gentile, and then at some point somebody translated it into Hebrew, and because the story was so interesting, maybe, we don't know, it was made part of the Hebrew religious text. So for him, he thinks everything points to the book not written by somebody who was a Jewish. To him, he thinks the book was written by somebody from outside. Maimonides doesn't. He tells us that it's also not very clear when this book was written, but he's almost so sure that it's fictional. And even though the book is fictional, it has very profound teachings and profound insights, in particular regarding divine providence. And I've recorded a video talking about divine providence. So let me read some of the things that Maimonides says about the book of Job. He says, the strange and wonderful book of Job treats of the same subject as we are discussing. Each basis is a fiction, conceived for the purpose of explaining the different opinions which people hold on divine providence. So he says the book is fictional, but it's one of the books that try to illustrate divine providence. You know that some of our sages clearly stated that Job has never existed and has never been created, and that he is a poetic fiction. So he says some of the Jewish sages, like the wise of the ancient, have always opined that Job never existed. He wasn't a real person. It's just a character in a poetic fiction. Those who assume that he has existed and that the book is historical are unable to determine when and where Job lived. Some of our sages say that he lived in the days of patriarchs. Others hold that he was a contemporary of Moses. Others place him in the days of David. And again, others believe that he was one of those who returned from Babylonian exile. So seems like there isn't much information about who Job really was besides what we read about him in the book of Job. And even the book itself, it's not clear when the book was written. So there is a lot of mystery and kind of confusion and lack of understanding of the origins of the book. According to both theories, the theory that Job did exist and the theory that he did not exist, the introduction to the book is certainly a fiction. So he says, even when you might try to contend or to accept the argument that the book is historical, its introduction is obviously fictional. I mean the portion which relates to the words of the adversary, which is Satan, the words of God to the former, and the handing over of Job to him. So that conversation between God and Satan, Maimonides says, is clearly fictional. Even when we decide to believe that Job was a real human being, is a real person who lived at some time in history, the introduction of the book is clearly fictional. This fiction, however, is not so far different from other fictions that it includes profound ideas. Let me read that again. This fiction, however, is in so far different from other fictions that it includes profound ideas and great mysteries, removes great doubt, and reveals the most important truths. So, despite this book being fictional, or Maimonides thinking it is fictional, because of course not everybody will agree that the book is fictional. We have to be aware of that or to acknowledge that. He still believes the book contains very profound ideas and great mysteries, as he calls it. And in fact, in the next video, I'm going to talk about one of those mysteries and ideas, and it's based on what Maimonides calls our human nature of being made of form and substance. I've talked about that in other videos, and it's not an idea that it's only from Maimonides. There are so many other philosophers who have come to the conclusion that we humans are made of two parts, the higher part and the lower part. The higher part being the intellectual, the divine part, and the lower part being the animal part. So there is a lesson about that, and it's so profound. I found it to be so profound personally, that Maimonides teaches us from the book of Job.